Good afternoon and welcome to A Beer with the Old Growler. I'm the Old Growler, Pete LaFrance, and I'm glad to have you with me on this Monday. It is Monday, the 1st of June, 2020, and this is day number 76 of us being in pause or secured, shall we say. And it's the 51st Old Growler presentation, so we've got a little bit to go here. And glad to have gone those 50. In case you're new and watching this for the first time, I have been covering, I'm a journalist, and I've been covering the malt beverage as the beer, spirits, wine, and hospitality industries for about 35 or 40 years. And, you know, when you cover an industry like that and you also enjoy visiting, well, it's a little tough when all the pubs, bars, and taverns are closed down. That's the truth. So if you take a look on the front page of this channel, the trailer there, you'll find out why the Old Growler is here. But as I look on the wall clock, it is 5:01, which means it's time for a beer. Now, I didn't get a chance to go over to the Henry Street Ale House and secure my usual growler of beer. So I'm going to crack open an example of some of the beers that we've been tasting in the past. This one, I figure since we're in Brooklyn, but we don't live in a tenement, we give the tenement a try. This is the Torch and Crown Brewing Company in Soho, over across the river in Manhattan. So let's crack this open and wet our whistle. Okay, we've got some folks here. Good to see you all. For those of you who are new to the Old Growler, the reason that I do tastings, there's two parts to the Old Growler. There's the beer tasting, well, there's the introduction, of course, and a few observations, and there's a beer tasting, and then after that, for those who like to stay, since, as I say, I've covered the malt beverage and hospitality industry for quite a while, I've got a few war stories to tell about being someone who covers that industry. In fact, I call it my life as a professional barfly. And so if you hang around, I have some stories to tell. Right, well, here we go. That's what I was looking for. I was looking for a nice, cool Pilsner today, and that's got a beautiful head on it. Cheers. Oh, yes, sir. That truly wets the whistle. I know. Wow. Well, let's take a look outside. It started out quite a nice day, but it's getting a little cloudy. We had a chance to go across the Brooklyn Bridge again this morning, as usual, back and forth, exercise, and I would say today there were probably a lot less people there than there has been usually. In the evenings, we've had some rather large crowds go across, so it's been a little tense watching it. Here at the end of the Brooklyn Bridge, it's the bridge is an icon, and so we do it does attract attention. Well, one more sip. That wasn't a sip beer, that was a quaff. Oh, thank you for the thumbs up. I appreciate that. Every thumbs up is always a help. In fact, it would really help if I got a subscription from you too, especially if you like the tastings and you'll want to take a look at what we've done before. Well, we've got quite a list, as I say. This is the 51st Old Growler, and I also have, I do believe, over 75 tasting notes, which were done at the Henry Street Ale House, and that's where we usually do our tastings. What we do is we get together. We used to get together, and we will get together again. Jerry Scott, who's the bar manager and the manager there, he's doing a great job of renovating. In fact, a lot of the places that I've noticed. Well, not a lot of the places, but many of the places that the people who are the bar or the restaurant, if they own the building, they have taken some time to really do some renovating. So it's going to be very interesting to see what those places turn out to be. But in any event, the ritual of the tasting, or as we call it, meeting expectations. Don't like to give number ratings, but we do say thumbs up or thumbs down. And so thanks for another thumbs up, in fact. So what we do is we take a look at the label. And first of all, take a look at the graphics. And the brewery, the brewing company is trying to tell us something about the graphics. And this was kind of interesting. It looks like a fire escape on the outside of a tenement building. And it's also got the symbolic water tower up there. Okay, and so we've taken a look at the graphics. And then we take a look at what it says. And tenement, you see the building, it's kind of a nice graphic design. A Pilsner. Okay, we know what a Pilsner is. That's a very light colored beer. And it says the Torch and Crown Brewing Company. So now we know where it comes from. And then we go around to the back here, Torch and Crown Brewing Company, New York City, New York. And it tells us that it is 4.9% alcohol by volume. And this is many of the breweries put little notices, little stories behind their beers to try and to give us an idea of the ambiance, or well, not the ambiance. How can you have ambiance in a beer? That's not the way to do it. Our city has always taken commitment. 6-story walk-up, tie your shoes. Subway car that's clearly at capacity, shove your way in. This was naturally written before the situation we're in. The energy, the pulse, it's defined through centuries of hard work, diversity, and not so occasional 2 a.m. street kebabs. Lagered for over 100 days, Tenement Pils is built for the city, a heartfelt declaration to the cause. No shortcuts, no substitutes. There's the 100 days there. That's an important thing to note, because many Pilsners, in fact most, are lager beers, which means that that's a German word for meaning a cellar. And what it means is that they are kept, it takes longer for them to ferment and to be able to be turned into beer than ales. Ales usually take a month. Ales a month before, from fermentation all the way to bottling. And it only takes a few days for the entire fermentation process, to where the fermentation process in a Pilsner takes usually at least a month. So you've got comparison of a month compared to a week. And that is one of the big differences between a lager and an ale. And the fact that a lager takes longer to ferment means that the esters, the aromas that come from the fermentation process, are much milder. And with ales, of course, only a week, oh boy, those aromas blossom like crazy. It's like having a breakfast of baked beans, and by noontime, well, folks know what you've had for breakfast. So anyways, we take a look, and then we would, Jerry would pour the beer, we'd take a look at it, we'd judge it. Is it exactly what it says it was? Yes, well, it meets expectations. Every once in a while, one of them exceeds expectations, and that's always a lot of fun. Oh, that's pretty much how the tastings work. Today we have a rather special beer. This one is from the Grand Teton Brewing Company. It's called Sheep Eater Scotch Ale. It's bottled in 2014. So it's 6 years old, one of those creatures from the back of the refrigerator. Oh, the bottle like that, though, it certainly wasn't kept in the refrigerator. Not all the time, anyway. It was in what I call the closet, which has a wine rack that holds 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 cases of wine. And there's usually 5 or 6 growlers empty growlers in there waiting to be filled, as well as a lineup of maybe specialty beers that need particular beers that have yeast in the bottom of them. They need to be kept standing up rather than a wine bottle set on its side. Oh boy, another sip if you don't, another quaff if you don't mind. That's a good one. All right, well, I was going to try something out, putting my script up here. I don't really have to look at myself. All right, well, as I said, I do try and script this so it is not as far moving or out of the, it doesn't get off to track. I like to stay on track, more or less. What track? I have no idea. There's always been 8 tracks, and now there's, even on a computer like this, you can go to 16 and 20 tracks. But I'm going to stay on this track, which is the beer track. Well, let's take a look at what we've got here. Grand Teton Brewing Company. Now, first of all, these beers are, this type of beer, as you can see, 2014, is brewed, they're one-offs, essentially. And I took a look at the website to see what type of, what their definition was. And there was absolutely nothing on the Grand Teton website. Now, I do happen to know that they were bought. Maybe, I believe it was 2009. And so this is definitely after 2009. But I really, they have nothing on their website about it. So we're flying blind, so to speak. So we're going to have to take a look at the bottle itself. As you can see, it's kind of a rustic looking thing. Very, almost like the cave paintings. Very strange characters on here. But the Grand Teton Brewing Company, we've got that down. Sheep Eater Scotch Ale. Well, I have not too much about sheep eating. And I'm not going anywhere near any other sheep, or nor have I ever been near any sheep. Scotch Ale, though, I do understand what a Scotch Ale is, and that usually is, sometimes it could be described as a wee heavy. Well, that would be, that's a little heavier in alcohol, but it's a dark beer, amber colored, and rather high in alcohol, and very sweet, not too bitter. All right, that's what the definition of what I understand the Scotch Ale to be. And it tells us here it is brewed and bottled by Grand Teton Brewing Company, 430 Old Jackson Highway, Victor, Idaho. And it has the the online address. 1 pint, 9.4 fluid ounces. Alcohol, 7.5% by volume, and it's a cellar reserve. So, so that's pretty much what would be called a one-off. It says it was bottled. It looks like 6.8 or 6.1. Now, I'm not too sure whether that's the American way of doing it or whether it's the European way of doing it, but it does have 14 on here. And that's about all of the information that I have on the bottle. Now, I'm going to cheat just a little bit. According to the folks at the Beer Advocate, Scotch ales are some of the world's most flavorful beers. So, well, hold on. This is what the people from Beer Advocate have on their website. Now, they have it in quotes, so I'm imagining that early on, this came from the Grand Teton people. So take that with a grain of salt. The way it's written seems to have come from the brewers themselves. So, Scotch ales are some of the world's most flavorful beers. Scotland's cold, blustery climate lends itself to the growing of barley and oats, but not the production of hops, which are almost always added sparingly. The yeast must work at cooler temperatures than customary for ales, resulting in a malter, cleaner, less fruity or estery beer. The color often comes from black roasted malt, which imparts some dryness, but because of lower attenuation and hopping rates, Scottish ales are always slightly sweet and incredibly drinkable. Ours was brewed with black roasted barley, biscuit, and peat smoked malt. It was gently hopped, fermented cool, and aged cold for weeks for smoothness. It is copper brown in color with some sweet maltiness and plenty of flavor. So that pretty much backs up what I was saying about what I expected a Scotch ale to be. Well, there's also a bit of a note down here from the folks at Beer Advocate. They have review. Oh no, this was from this is from the review, and it says to 214 vintage bomber, rough pour into thistle glass yields a nice foamy billowy head, nutty peaty aroma, very earthy. Taste brings in malt sweetness and roast grains, slick mouthfeel, and lingering sweetness. So we've been forewarned that that's pretty much what we were looking for. Now, over the last week, we've had an episode when my favorite beer was introduced to my laptop, and we were a little bit worried. So I'm going to maintain social distancing between the beer and the keyboard. It was a nice hiss. Pardon me. When we opened it up, let's take a look. Oh yes. Well poured. Okay. It certainly meets expectations as far as the color goes, and the head of the beer, the foam, is very there's very small bubbles, and in the world of beer geeks, we say that it is a very tightly knit head. I'm getting some hop aroma off of that off of that. But I'm also getting a kind of a sherry or port wine. Oh, now that is exactly what it said it was going to be. It tastes more alcoholic than it says it is, 7.8%. I would have bet possibly maybe 9, but I know that it doesn't pick up any more alcohol in the bottle because there is no extra yeast. There's no residual yeast. Oh yeah, that meets expectations right down to the wire. And even with the cheat sheet, it's a contemplative beer. That's what it's not something that you would chug down. That's for sure. I'm going to clean my palate with the for some reason I had something stuck in my throat. Not too sure what it was, but it's gone now. All right. So did Sheep Eater Scotch Ale from Grand Teton Brewing Company meet expectations? It certainly did. In fact, it exceeded expectations. Here's hoping all of your beers meet expectations. Well, I'm going to hold on to that. Now, for those of you who are going to you were here for the tasting, I thank you very much. Please do me a favor, subscribe, give me a thumbs up, and comment down in the comment box if you like this, what you liked about it, what you didn't, and if there's a beer that you might know about that I can seek out. I would appreciate any comments as far as that goes. I can always reach out to the breweries and see if they'll send me one for a sample. You know how it is. The way of a professional beer taster. Oh, well, a professional barfly. Which brings me to my stories about being a professional barfly. My life as a professional barfly, yes, sir. Well, it certainly has been interesting. I cannot argue that at all. And it hasn't been just all beer, and it hasn't been all just uh, sampling. In fact, one of the really interesting events was an invitation that I received from a public relations lady who was representing, I believe, Winebow, which was an importer of different wines. It made sense, Winebow. I wish I could remember her name because I certainly owe her a debt on this one, because she introduced me to La Confiterie de l'Archin de Rôtissière. Now, according to sources, it is an international gastronomic society founded in Paris in 1950, based on the traditions of old French Royal Guild of Goose Roasters. It's an organization dedicated to fine cuisine and promoting and developing gastronomic values, while at the same time widening its focus. And what it is a group all over the world. They have groups, and in New York City there was quite an active group back in, this is 1992, and they had it's a group of people that collect wines and enjoy what would be called haute cuisine restaurants. And as I say, this organization is very involved in developing food, not only, but in a traditional way, but all different cultures. And they have an organization called Les Jeunes Chefs de Rôtissière, which means the young chefs competition. And the Chaîne de Rôtissière organizes a cooking competition for young chefs under the age of 27, sponsored by, they have to be sponsored by a Chaîne member. And the goal of the competition is to encourage cultural differences in food presentation and preparation, but using traditional approaches. Now, the fun part of this, and again, this goes back to 1990, and they have been in operation since the 1950s, is that this competition is a, quote, black box, end of quote, competition, where the competitor doesn't know the ingredients he or she has to cook with until their arrival at the competition. Now, this sounds an awful lot like some of the television shows that have developed in the last 10 years. So let's see, I don't think there's anything new under the sun, is there? Okay, but they have 30 minutes to write the menu after they see the box, and then 3.5 hours to prepare a 3-course dinner for 4 people. Now, that's quite a competition. And the people involved, as you can certainly understand, are very, very involved in cuisines of all kind, but traditional. And as far as the beverage of choice, for them, it's wine. And they had the Chaîne that I went to in Manhattan back then. These people enjoyed showing off their wines and sharing their wines. And I remember sitting there and thinking, this is very much like people, homebrewers, sharing and tasting different beers and being very excited about the beers. These people were excited about the wines, and it wasn't, oh, sip here and sip. No, these were quaffing wines. These were wines to eat with food and to enjoy. And it was quite an experience. The dinner that I went to, I would say that there was maybe 10 people on each end. It was a large table, family style. And there had to have been 20 people altogether, maybe 24. And it was, most of the people knew each other. And it was held at Daniel Ballou's restaurant. And he is one of the top, I believe he has Michelin stars up the nose. But he was the chef of the night. And again, these people work in high circles as far as the culinary. And the wines. The wines were fantastic. I remember most specifically the fact that the main course were beef cheeks. Now, usually beef cheeks are peasant food, and they need to be braised and very slowly in red wine. And these beef cheeks were the most marvelous examples of using strange parts of the animal. As far as I was concerned, that was that was just the essence of beef cheeks. The conversation, there were doctors, lawyers, editors, and myself, and the woman that I was escorting, or she was escorting me, one of the two. But it was not an elite conversation about, oh, this one is so bitter, and the nose on this one matches the legs, and oh, certainly the body. But no, it was quite interesting, and the food, of course, was marvelous, and everyone was showing off their wines. That was a really fun part. It was tasting, particularly. I learned some of the areas of Bordeaux and how the changes, and very, very wonderful to explain all of the nuances, and not so much in a teaching way, in a didactic way, but in a conversational way. So it was great food. It was interesting people, interesting conversation, and a lot to learn. And one of the most important things I learned, and as I mentioned earlier, these wines were exquisite. Many of them from vintages that were very well known as being fantastic, and some of them going back 25, 30, 40 years. Wines age differently than beers, and I'll go into that at another time, but these wines were just marvelous examples. And after it was over, what I took away from that experience was that understanding amongst even connoisseurs, great wine collectors, that wine was meant to be enjoyed. I learned there, most remarkably, that there is a place for collectibles. But when a bottle of wine becomes a collectible, it's worthless as wine. And wine is meant to be enjoyed. So that was, I think there was, and a little follow-up to that is about, it was after I had left Bev, so it had to have been 90, 94, 95, maybe it was, yeah, probably when the Cooking and Eating with Beer came out, which was 97. There was at Sotheby's, there was an auction of wines that had been in Thomas Jefferson's cellar. And so, of course, they bring out each bottle. They put it on the display stand. Okay, this is the number 421. It's from 1782 or 17 whatever, and it's for, bidding will begin at $2 million. So yeah, they got the bidding going up and everything. Everything's fine. And so finally, they get to the end of the bidding, and the auctioneer says, sold to this person for an incredible, extraordinary price. And the person reaches over to pick up the bottle, lifts the bottle up by the neck, and apparently the bottom had been scored for some reason, 5-2, 6-7, and 5-1. No, had been fractured for some reason. And when he lifted the bottle up, the bottom stayed there, and the wine went all over the place. So much for a collectible. Well, that's my story as being is what I've learned as a professional barfly. And I did appreciate that. And as I say, I wish I could remember her name, because it certainly was a wonderful experience. And so for those of you who are still here, I thank you for being here. I appreciate it. Tomorrow, for those of you who are watching tomorrow, I'm going to crack open a 1993 Russian Imperial Stout from Courage, John Courage, in Middlesex, England. Now, I tasted another one of these, and this was given to me this Saturday by Corey Hill. He runs the Wet Whistle wine store in Red Hook, and he found that in his refrigerator. And again, it's a sharing thing. He said, "Peter, I'd like to share this with you. This is a beer that I've been keeping," and I certainly thanked him for that. So we'll be cracking that open tomorrow, which brings me to an observation. Today I've tasted a wine from 2014, and I'm still going to be tasting it. There's an awful lot in there. Maybe I'll have that with dinner. We're having pork lo mein. So yeah, that might go. That pork lo mein's a little meaty. This might just work. But there we go. But anyways, I want to thank folks for being here. Again, a thumbs up, and certainly leave some comments. And for those of you who are coming in at a date other than June 1st, I appreciate you stopping by. Take a look back at some of the playlist that we've got here. This is Growler number 51, so you've got quite a collection. And also for the tastings, as far as meeting expectations, take a look at the tastings for the Henry Street Ale House, and that will give you an idea of what our tasting techniques are all about. Oh, that's good. Well, as I finally come to the end of this, let me hope that, and thank you all for coming, for visiting. And tomorrow I will be here, and look forward to seeing all of you at a later date. Stay safe.